In today's video, we continue on with our NHL offseason plan series. Today, we're looking at the 8th ranked team from the regular season, the Colorado Avalanche. Just a few years removed from being Stanley Cup champions, how does this team get back to being a more solid contender? The last few years, they've had some playoff runs that haven't led to the success they were looking for. What should we expect from them between the draft, free agency, and trades to try to get back to that? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the 8th ranked team from the regular season, the Colorado Avalanche. Now, in case you're wondering, we kind of skipped over a couple of teams, and that's because they're still playing, and that's the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers are still in the Stanley Cup final, of course. By the time this makes it to YouTube, it's possible that the Stanley Cup could have been awarded and the final could be over because this is being recorded prior to Game 6. We'll see what happens. Obviously, if it goes Game 7, we'll still have another few days here before we know that the Cup is going to be awarded and the season will be officially over on the ice. But for right now, we're going to talk about the Colorado Avalanche, and I'll probably post Edmonton and Florida last in the series regardless of the outcome of that. So we'll see what happens. So we're going to recap last year, take a look at how things went as a team, a bunch of individuals, look at how the team has changed. Of course, they made some significant moves last year. Look at their cap space, internal business, and what are the top questions facing this team in the offseason to get back to being one of the top couple of contenders here in the not only the Western Conference, but in the entire NHL. So let's first recap last year. So the Avalanche had a solid campaign in 24-25, finishing with a record of 49-29-4 for 102 points. That's just down slightly from the year before where they had 50 wins, 25 losses, and 7 overtime losses for 107 points. So 5 points fewer, not a drastically big deal. Obviously, for the most part, largely similar results in the standings, but they did get very different results on the ice that were, obviously they had to make some adjustments. They made a lot of, moves roster-wise, was affected how they play. Goal scoring was still pretty high. They scored 273 goals, which was 6th highest in the league. The year before they had scored 304. So even though they were still the 6th highest scoring team, that is a drop of 31 goals. However, the good news is goals against last year was more of an issue. They allowed 254 last year. Well, this year they knocked that down to 231 for the 12th ranked team in the league. So that's a 23 goal differential in their favor. So all in all, we're talking about an 8 goal difference over the course of the season when you're looking at plus minus. Like I said, really, they might have gotten there a slightly different way, but overall, largely very similar results. Power play was strong as usual, 24.8% for 8th best. The penalty kill was strong and respectable, 79.8 for 12th best. So, clearly this team had flaws in the beginning, and they went out and they tried to address them, moving out both the goaltenders that were on our roster at the start of the year. Looking at the goalie results, we'll start with the new starter, or that wasn't there at the beginning, Mackenzie Blackwood, who came over from the Sharks. He had a record of 28-21-6 with a 2.55 goals against and a 9.12 save percentage. And of course, they also acquired Scott Wedgwood in a trade with the Dallas Stars with a record of 14-6-2, who had a 2.32 goals against and a 9.08 save percentage. So both goalies, which I think your name has to end in Wood to be on this team lately. All the, between Mileswood, Blackwood, Wedgwood, the Woodballs here, if you will, had a pretty strong campaign. So all in all, like I said, both goalies gone out, new goalies come in. That's almost unheard of that you see a team trade both their starter and their backup in the course of the same season, and by the halfway point of the year or deep before the deadline, have a completely different tandem. Looking at their individual leaders on the ice, led by Nathan MacKinnon, 116 points, of course, was in the running for the Hart Trophy, and the Art Ross as usual. It's becoming an annual tradition for him. Cale Makar, another solid year, wins the Norris, 92-point campaign. Marty Necas comes over from the Hurricanes in the big Rantanen trade, which we'll discuss here in a moment. He had a really hot start with the Hurricanes before the trade, finished with 83 points total. Brock Nelson, 4th in team scoring, based on obviously a combination of his Islander stats and Avalanche stats. Of course, he came over from the Islanders, 56 points. And of course, Lehkonen was finished out things here with 45. So obviously, like I said, lots of trades. This team is very different. compared to how it started. Like I said, the goalie trades came earlier in the campaign. Of course, moving Georgiev and Anunin, bringing in Blackwood and Wedgwood, the huge Rantanen trade for Natchez. That was shocking by most people's accounts across the league. All in all, I know Rantanen's camp was likely playing pretty hardball in negotiations, but I don't think they expected the trade to happen. I think all in all, he would have much preferred to stay. And look at the contract he ended up signing. To me, it wouldn't have made sense for them. But I know the team argued that having a better mix and having too many players making that much money probably wasn't good for the overall balance of the team. And I guess we'll see long term if they're right or not. But getting Natchez was good, but is Natchez going to be there long term? That's the next big question that we'll discuss later in the video. Of course, they also, like I said, picked up guys like Brock Nelson. They picked up Charlie Coyle, Ryan Lindgren. They were extremely active here at the deadline. And not only that, but they got Captain Gabriel Landeskog back for a playoff run. He didn't play the first few games of the playoffs, but after missing multiple years with a recovering knee injury and multiple surgeries, he's finally back. And he actually looked pretty good. You could tell, he had a few games in the American Hockey League to finish out the regular season. And then, obviously probably was fair to say a little rusty, wasn't quite as dominant self, but he was getting closer and closer to being that player as the return moved on. So obviously, great news on that front. But for a team that was so active at the deadline, fair to say did not have the postseason that they were hoping for at all. Now, going into this offseason, they've already re-signed Brock Nelson, so he's sticking around on a multi-year contract extension. So obviously the assets they gave for him, which turned out to be Cal Ritchie, who's a pretty good-looking prospect and a first-rounder, obviously, that's a hefty price, but at least Nelson's going to be around. I'm a little bit, as much as I understand what they gave up and they had the hope for him long term, Nelson didn't really have a great run with the Avalanche to finish things out. Wasn't sure he was the best fit, but I mean, historically speaking, he's been a pretty good goal scoring centerman. Pretty durable, doesn't miss a lot of time. You can generally, for the most part, count on close to in or around the 30 goal mark. So I understand why they like the player, and for what they gave up, it's nice to see him stick around, but based on the small sample size we saw, I hope that next year goes better for him because it wasn't great during the small sample that we get to see him be an Avalanche at the end of the year. Ryan Lindgren and Charlie Coyle, like I said, certainly some debatable players in their future because the cap space, they've only got $1.2 million. They had more, but of course the Nelson contract ate up a lot of that. They do have 19 players in their contract already, so they don't have a lot of room, nor do they need to fill out a lot of roster spots. But let's take a look at their internal business here, and we'll see what's going on that front. Then we'll look at the opportunities and the questions facing the team and trades, free agency, draft, all that kind of stuff. Restricted free agents, they've only got the one, Sam Malinsky. I have no doubt they'll want to qualify him and get him under contract. UFA-wise, they've got Jimmy Vesey, Jonathan Drouin, Yoel Kiviranta, Eric Johnson, Ryan Lindgren, and of course the contract of Tucker Pullman, who we know isn't returning. So, on the UFA side of things, I don't know about Eric Johnson. I don't know if he's going to continue playing. Does he want to sign a cheap one-year deal? Even I'm not even sure what the options are going to be there. I think Johnson, if he wants to have any chance to remain with the Avalanche, is probably going to have to be a wait-and-see approach because they just don't have a lot of space. And if he's flexible and patient, then maybe they can, because they're going to have to make some cost-cutting moves, and maybe they figure out a way to get him a league minimum deal. I'm not sure. Jonathan Drouin is probably going to have to test the market. I think, we've seen him play some of his better hockey in the last few years, being a member of the Avalanche, reuniting with his old teammate from junior, Nathan McKinnon. Of course, they don't always play on the same line, but it's been good for him. It's rejuvenated him for sure. I think he can definitely get a better contract than he's had, but, does he want to move on? I'm not really sure what the feeling is there. It might be challenging. We've heard Ryan Lindgren's likely going to hit the market and most likely leaves. I think he's probably a player that the Avalanche can't really afford. Looking at players that are eligible for extensions, you're looking at guys, a few bottom sixers like Drury and Kelly, but the bigger names like Natchez, Coyle and Josh Manson are all interesting for sure. And some of the futures could be debatable. It's hard to say because the Avalanche don't have much room. They do have some spots to fill out. They're going to want to try to get better if they can. And, well, it's going to be challenging to do so. So, looking at the top questions facing this team, what should we expect from them this offseason? Well, question number one for me is after re-signing Brock Nelson, they really don't have a lot of cap space. So, assuming that Gabriel Landeskog continues to play, and we are expecting that. I mean, he had a good recovery, good return. Like, he looked good in the playoffs. He's been named to Sweden's Olympic roster because they obviously made the announcement this year in the last couple of days about the top 6 players announced for each country going to the 2026 Olympic Games in Italy. Canada obviously named McKinnon and Makar, so they're on the roster, and Sweden also named Gabriel Landeskog. So we have every reason to believe he's back to being a full regular participant at this point. So they're not going to have that contract to go on LTIR. They've signed Nelson. What are they going to do? Well, there's lots of chatter about cost-cutting moves. Like I said, we've heard some names that are out there. There's some debate on whether or not they felt Charlie Coyle was a great fit. He may not be back. They could look to move him and onto another team again. Obviously, there's some speculation about Samuel Girard and Josh Manson, maybe one of those guys being moved. Depends on what you're preferring to keep. You probably can't keep both, but Girard's a smaller player, but he's got really quick feet, good offensive instincts, good puck mover. Obviously, they've liked Girard in Colorado for some time. He's been rumored to be a cost-cutting move in the past, and it's never happened. So Manson's up for a contract extension this summer if they wanted to talk to him about that, so they could explore those talks before making decisions, but ultimately those are kind of some of the main names you were kind of hearing as far as being potential cost-cutting trade bait type moves. I wouldn't completely rule out like a Miles Wood or a Ross Colton. They may have to look at players like that too, and depending on what has value, but there's definitely going to be a few trades, and it's going to be either a futures-based or strictly a cap dump type of move where they're going to have to shed some money for sure. So obviously, there's lots of things in that regard. Obviously, when it comes to the draft, they don't really have a lot of picks. They don't have any picks early on. They traded their first rounder. They also don't have a second or third round pick either. They're not picking till the 4th round. So I don't know if maybe some of these cost-cutting moves, they try to get a pick or two that gets them earlier into the draft. They do have picks in rounds 4 through 7, so they will be making a few selections. They'll have to rely on their scouting staff to hopefully find a few gems there late in the draft, like the teams hope to do. So there's that, and of course, like I said, there is a lot of discussion about Natchez. Now, they don't have to make a decision on this right away, but do you need a distraction next year, right? There was some NHL insider stating that Natchez wasn't thrilled or completely sold on staying in Colorado long term. I was a little surprised. I mean, he seemed to do well, seemed to be a good fit, but we don't know if he wants to be there long term. He was feeling the same way in Carolina, so they need to iron this out. To me, I'm getting to the bottom of this. I'm talking extension, and if it's looking like Natchez doesn't want to be there long term, I think you need to sort this out now rather than have it happen mid-season. Ultimately, you can't have another situation, I don't think, like happened with Rantanen last year. It just sent shockwaves through the locker room, and especially the core guys that have been playing with Rantanen a long time. I just think it was stunning. Now they get this guy back who's in the trade, who's a really good player. And if he doesn't want to be there, well, that's a problem, right? So I don't know what his deal is exactly. I don't know what his wishes are, but it's hard to say if that speculation is completely true. But if there is something to it, then they have to figure something out, and in a hurry. Obviously, that would be a major blow to this team if they got through next year and they could potentially risk losing him for nothing. You're not going to want to trade him at the deadline, ideally, on a team that's expected, I think everybody expects the Avalanche to be a playoff team next year. If anything, they're trying to figure out how they can get better, and that's going to be a challenge. I mean, obviously, having Landeskog back all year, if you throw him on the lineup for a full season, and hopefully he's somewhat close to what he used to be, and if Natchez does stay and he's there all year, well, combined with what you don't have in Rantanen anymore, maybe those two players can, make up the difference here. And then, of course, you still got some other top players. You still got Nathan MacKinnon, you still got Nichushkin, you still got Lehkonen. You brought back Brock Nelson. Like, you still have a pretty decent looking bottom or top six. You still got, potentially you're not moving everybody else out. You still might have guys like Coyle or Colton. Like, it's going to be tricky, yes, and you're going to have to make some moves that may not be something you want to do, but you need to find some space in some shape or form here. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think their middle and bottom part of the lineup could look a little bit different, obviously, depending on what they do for cost-cutting moves. Same thing with the blue line. Obviously, your guys like Makar and Taves are not going anywheres, and then after that, you're going to see probably, like I said, at least one change to the blue line, maybe two, and then you're going to see a few changes within the bottom half of the forward group. The goaltenders are pretty well set for right now as well, and a couple pieces of your bottom six are probably sticking around, like Kelly and Drury, for example, but I wonder how Jack Drury's feeling as well, because there was reports at one point that he wanted out of Carolina. Not so much he didn't like it there. He just wanted more of an opportunity to play higher in the lineup. And here he is in Colorado. It's also a pretty deep team where he's still stuck. He's not going to get any chance to be a top six player with that team either. So I do wonder about his future too. Some big decisions to be made, and it's not quite clear exactly how they get back on track. I mean, if they had the space, you'd be hearing speculation about them trying to add in free agency, I'm sure. Whether, McKinnon's old buddy Marchand from Nova Scotia would be somebody they'd want to talk to, or Mitch Marner, some of the top free agents out there. I know McKinnon's a big Marner fan, but this doesn't seem likely or possible that they could have the ability to go after either of those guys. They'd have to move out significant money, and after signing Brock Nelson, to me, that just kind of takes them out of any chance of doing something like that. So I don't think we're going to be seeing a team that's very active in free agency unless they do move out a couple of cost-cutting moves, and they got to try to be creative to find a few players, some cheap options, and maybe fill some gaps. So we'll see what happens, but the Avalanche have some tough decisions to make. Let me know what you think they're going to do this offseason, especially in respect to trades and free agency. How do they make this team better and become a stronger contender for next year and beyond? Let me know your thoughts, and we'll talk further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.